Hey everybody, it's Lou from BlinkBid. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to talk about some of the new protocols that are going to happen on photography sets as we kind of move forward through this pandemic period that we're in. I just have to say, to start out, that in Los Angeles today, or I guess about 3 days ago, they came out with a film and TV health protocol sheet, and I've had a look at it with a couple of producer friends of mine, and it's pretty good. It's solid. I mean, it's more than we need to consider on photography sets, but it's an excellent place to start. It's a great guide, a good foundation to get things going and start planning how you're going to be running your sets. There's going to be a significant difference between small sets, groups of 4 people or less, and bigger sets, which as you start getting into more and more people, it may behoove you to get yourself a safety guide, a health and safety person. There's been some talk about taking temperatures on set, whether we need to have a nurse or some sort of medic on set. That's still kind of up in the air. We're still kind of looking at all that. But it's, I think, some information I'm going to have for you tomorrow. We're going to be doing a webinar. That's a Q&A, so you can ask me anything instead of doing all the questions today. The most important thing to remember as we move forward with our sets is to not compromise the health and safety of your crew and your talent. The thing about masks is masks have been proven to work really, really effectively. There was a story in Texas about a hair salon where one of the beauticians were infected with COVID and she didn't know it. And because she wore a mask and her clients wore a mask, no one else that was a customer got infected. So the masks are actually highly, highly effective. So that should become a normal sort of thing on the set. Obviously, when you're shooting talent and you have to take that off, we're trying to consider to diminish the amount of exposure they could have. Again, this is all really, really important to keep in mind. So when you're setting up your shot, masks should be worn. There may be concerns about makeup getting scraped off and lines caused by the mask. So, there's gonna have to be some awareness about that. But, the whole idea is to make sure that when you're shooting, the masks are off, and then when you're not shooting, put the mask back on. Sort of like if you're shooting a young man or a young woman wearing, like a bikini or something like that, and you're shooting a summer catalog in winter, just have that, how you have that coat standing by to throw on them when the camera's not rolling or not shooting. That's kind of what we're thinking about for masks. So again, always make your health, the health of your crew and your talent the utmost priority. In this next part, I'm going to talk about, there's been a lot of questions about liability on if somebody gets COVID on your set. I'm not a lawyer, so I have to preface that to let you know that I'm not a lawyer, but it's something you can talk about with your own lawyers. But the discussions have pretty much been, if you're doing best efforts on your set with health and safety, then you're pretty much going to be in fairly decent shape. That's why these best efforts are critical, not to compromise. We're going to put links to everything I talk about today and send it out to everybody who attended, so you can get these documents. But there are waivers and assumptions of risk that you can have signed, so everybody knows exactly what they're getting into. They'll read this, they'll sign it, they'll understand they're going into a situation where, in this new world we live in, COVID exists and their exposure is possible. On terms of communicating these health and safety measures to the client, which is always the big deal, because there's an anticipation that budgets below the line or all the production expenses are going to go up probably between 7 and 10, 11%. So that is out of hand. Every production that you do from here on out is going to, the production costs are going to be about 7 to 10% higher than they were before the COVID pandemic. So that's something that you have to communicate very specifically to your client. In our software in BlinkBid, we have launched, as of this morning, a way to mark or call out line items that have to do with health and safety. There's a little checkbox. When you select that checkbox, there's going to be a little shield that pops up both on your screen in the bid and in the printout or the PDF. And those line items are not to be they should not be negotiated on. Those are really important to let your clients know that those are the costs, even though they may be a little malleable, but those are the costs for health and safety, and that you're not willing to compromise on those things. On our side of the budget for photographers and producers, please keep in mind that that would be a very uncool way to like maybe pad your bill, because we need to keep those line items like sacrosanct. And if there's any sort of anybody using that to sort of add a couple of dollars to their budget to maybe realize a little bit more profit, and then that gets called out or caught or whatever it is, and clients start pushing back on that, we're going to lose all of our footing for something that's really, really critical for what we're thinking is going to be about 2 to 3 years of, a lot of safety protocols to protect against infection. Again, I have to say, I'm not a lawyer, but if you do the proper safety protocols, you get your waivers signed, you should be fairly well taken care of in terms of liability. Also keep in mind that it's very difficult to really pinpoint where somebody might have gotten infected if that happens, if it gets to this horrible worst case scenario where somebody's accusing you of that your site gave them COVID-19. The other things to consider overall is that you want to be very, very communicative to everyone who's on the set, that there would be very little tolerance for any sort of compromising of the safety protocols, and also to your clients. There's inevitably, with all client situations, you're going to have people pushing back on costs. Things on a bigger set, if you have to spend $1,000 per hand wash station, you need to have 5 hand wash stations. I mean, that's going to be a big thing. If you have to buy the hand wash stations, if you have to rent them, you have to transport them. When you start thinking about bigger sets, you need to think about things like that. So again, the film and TV health protocol sheet that we're going to make available is an excellent place to start. Another consideration is if you have people that are not necessary on the set, and this comes from the client side too, is absolutely encourage your clients not to bring anybody out that doesn't need to be there. If you have people that can work from base camp, let them do that. It's the most important thing to minimize the number of people on the set that are superfluous. So all good stuff that's happening. There's been a lot of talk about health and safety on the set, and it now feels like it's starting to congeal into a set of best practices. Another thing to think about when you are bidding a job is there was a lot of talk in the beginning, especially between me and a lot of the wonderful group in Atlanta that I was working with, to have a health and safety category. And the idea of having health and safety categories has sort of gone away now. So what we're trying to do is just, if you have a health and safety officer, they're going to go under the crew. If you have masks and gloves and Purell that you have to buy, that's going to go under expendables. So everything's going to get allocated to their proper categories that you would for any other job, depending on where that belongs, because we feel very strongly that the client is going to see that and it's going to make sense within the context of where it's being presented versus having a specific health and safety category, which could be sort of talked about. There was also some talk about putting a health and safety percentage on top of the job, so we sort of like what we do in BlinkBid with insurance. But some other producers and reps that I spoke to said not probably the best idea, because everyone knows what insurance costs. So when they see that percentage, it kind of makes a lot of sense. And then if we put the health and safety thing, which is all new territory, they may push back on it and it could cause too much conversation. So the distillation of all of these discussions has been, let's just put health and safety items in where they belong with the rest of the other camera and rental gear type stuff. So this is just going to be a quick talk. I'm just about done. We're going to do a Q&A tomorrow, which will go a little bit longer, where I can answer any questions that you have specifically. And this we'll get this links out to all the information that I talked about today, probably in the next couple of hours, so you can use them to have your questions ready. So really appreciate your time. It's good to be here, and it feels good that things are starting to reopen and get started for production. So I wish you all well.